Mr. President, we revert to motions relating to the business or Senate of the Senate and moved by Minister.
Senator Cummings.
Mr. President, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 22 and 45-2. 22-1 and 45-2 for the duration of today's sitting.
The question is that the standing orders so mentioned be suspended for the remainder of the sitting. Honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. The thing is the ayes have it.
Revert to public business. Order
Public
number one.
business is the order of the day. Order number one.
In the name of the Honorable Leader of the House. Mr. President, we have to go back to the introduction of bills,
Okay.
so we can do the first reading of bills on the order paper.
Sure, certainly. Senator Cummings.
Mr. President, I rise on this occasion to present
First reading.
Sorry, sir. We have to do, we need to do a first reading, so we got to do a first reading of all this.
Mr. President, I rise on this occasion to present the first reading of the following bills. We gave notice in our sitting earlier this week, and so I move the first readings of the following bill: the Constitution Amendment Bill of 2022, but we did both.
First time is the appropriation
But
bill.
you can't vote. But Control wasn't there, let him know. Control wasn't in there, let him know. Look. Current.
Mr. President, we revert to introduction of bills, so we can move the first reading of the Appropriation Bill 2022.
Certainly. Introduction of bills. Senator Cummings.
Mr. President, as you are aware, in the other place, they passed the appropriations bill earlier this week. We move on this occasion the first reading of the appropriations bill 2022 to 2023.
The The question is that the Appropriations Bill 2022-2023 be read the first time. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Revert to public business.
Public business is the order of the day.
Order number 1, sir.
Order number 1.
In the name of the Honorable Leader of the House, to move the second reading of the Constitution Amendment Bill 2022.
Senator Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. President. And as this is our first substantive meeting since we have returned to the Senate, I would wish to welcome all honorable senators back to this place, and those who are joining us for the first time to welcome you to the Senate. It is going to be an interesting time as we move forward in a world where we are fraught with change and flux, and there are so many issues before us as a country that we are going to have to depend on the collaboration of all sides of this honorable chamber in order to be able to chart our way forward. Mr. President, the matter before us at this time is the amendment to the Constitution to allow for two things to happen. We went into an election, Mr. President, at the end of 2022. We had an administration that in 2018 went into an election and won all 30 seats of the administration. On that occasion, Mr. President, you saw that on the eve of the opening of the first sitting, that a member from on this side opted to cross the floor and to constitute what was then known as the office of the Leader of the Opposition. In this instance as well, Mr. President, we now have, again in 2022, another scenario where the confidence of the Barbadian public was again reposed, overwhelmingly so, in the administration led by Prime Minister Mia Amor-Motley and constituted by the Barbados Labour Party. And so once more, Mr. President, clap for that. And so once more, Mr. President, we do have a parliament where in the lower house, all 30 seats are constituted by members of the Barbados Labour Party. In addition, Mr. President, we raised the other issue of that of the age of majority, and you've heard the Honourable Attorney General in great detail in his presentation on the 8th of February speak to the number of things that an 18-year-old can do in this country, including drive, including get married, including have a family, including purchase alcohol, including vote, but that which is prohibited in the legislation that we currently have before us, that is our Constitution, is that he cannot, however, serve himself. He can support those who seek to represent him, but he himself cannot be the representative. Those two things, Mr. President, constitute the basis of the Constitutional Amendment Bill, which is before this honorable place today. And I wish to start, first of all, by saying, Mr. President, that sometime, many moons ago, if I think back to what I was doing when I was 18 years old, there are at least two honorable members of the other place, the Minister of Transport and Works and the Minister of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs, who, when we were 18 years old, we were enthusiastic students at the University of the West Indies, in the case of the Minister of People's Empowerment and Elder Affairs, having moved on from the Barbados Community College, and the Minister of Transportation and Works and I, we were young students at the Barbados Community College. We were convinced that we could change the world. We created a new club which talked about environmental sustainability. We were early writers under the tutelage of our current Consul General in New York as young reporters, and we wrote on all kinds of international issues. I would never forget my very first article in Hype newspaper, as it was then called, and the last sentence of that, I was talking about a Sustainable Development Conference. At the time it was being held in Barbados, the Sustainable Development Conference on Small Island Developing States, and the Barbados Plan of Action, which emanated from that. And I remember writing my first article in Hype newspaper as an 18-year-old at the time, speaking on international development and international environment policy. Mr. President, I went on then to be a student at the University of the West Indies at the Mona campus, where I remember my very first week there, we were having an intense national and regional discussion over the passage of nuclear transshipments through the Caribbean Sea. And we began an intense regional conversation, Mr. President, on the implications of nuclear transshipment through the Caribbean Sea. And I was very pleased over many years later when I joined the diplomatic service to then be a part of a process where the Caribbean Sea was designated as a special area in the context of sustainable development because of the concerns that a nuclear transshipment through the Caribbean Sea would result in catastrophic results for the Caribbean people. I was 18 years old then, Mr. President. The honorable member, who is now the Minister of Transportation and Works, was an 18-year-old then, Mr. President. The honorable member, who is the Minister today for People Empowerment and Elder Affairs, was 18 years old then, Mr. President. We were not predominantly concerned with parochial issues. We were focusing as 18-year-olds on national issues, on regional issues, and on international issues, and writing and speaking on those things, Mr. President. Those were the things that we as 18-year-olds did when we were at that stage. And we have the privilege of being able to serve now in the government of Barbados as part of the policy-making framework. And here we are, having an opportunity to give 18-year-olds, just like we once were, that chance to bring I would not want to give my full support to the opportunity now for another 18-year-old to have their voice have currency. Any 18-year-old have currency. Any 18-year-old have the agency that their voice matters. Mr. President, I also am a part of a government. I'm a part of an administration where a prime minister who leads us and who leads us extraordinarily well in the views of all around the world has created an innovative concept called Future Barbados. Mr. President, last year in November, I had the privilege of being at Elara Court where there was, in preparation as part of our Republican celebrations, I sat at Elara Court and in the audience, and I listened to a group of young people who constitute this entity called Future Barbados. These were all, in many instances, ranging from 18 all the way up to 35, but these were extraordinary young people, extraordinary Barbadians, who are here and walk among us, and they are speaking, Mr. President, on issues relating to sustainable development, like I did at 18 years old. They are speaking about digital transformation and innovation. I didn't have, Mr. President, and many of us in this chamber did not grow up in the technology generation, but these young people have, and they see the world and how we live in that world through entirely different lens. And so they're talking about those things. They're talking about the future jobs of the future, Mr. President, and how we as a people are going to engage in the world that is before us. This administration, Mr. President, has created pillars where those young people come together with persons who are established and professional and experienced in their own right. And they bring the combination of experience and expertise with the values of innovation and freshness and new eyes, Mr. President. And that is the commitment of this administration. Mr. President, we also live in a space where Twitter, Instagram, social media throws up so many voices. Everyone has an opinion, but you have a cadre of young people who are out there who are extraordinarily immersed in development and politics. And they understand the value of their voice, and they use social media in ways that we did not have at 18 to share their perspectives on the issues of the day. And in many instances, if you take the time, Mr. President, some of the ideas coming from among these young people are extraordinary. This morning, before I came to this honorable chamber, I attended and hosted a State of the Tourism Industry press briefing across all of the agencies under my ministry and updating the members of the press on where we are proposing to go over the next few years and what the winter season for arrivals has looked like. And I had the opportunity to introduce a member of that same group, Future Barbados, who now was invited and is a member of the board of directors of the Barbados Tourism Marketing, Inc. A young attorney, a young advocate. She has an extraordinarily strong voice on women and gender affairs, and she has brought incredible value and freshness in what I have now determined is one of the most diversified boards for the Barbados Tourism Marketing, Inc., and we have brought that freshness. Mr. President, this government is proposing in this amendment bill to introduce, for the first time, the opportunity for young people here in Barbados to bring their voices not only to social media, not only to written newspaper articles, not only to their public advocacy, not only to boards and to directorates, not only to sitting in fora where they are given opportunities to share their views and then they go away. We are giving an opportunity, Mr. President, because we believe that there is agency and there is value in our youth. We want to be able to bring that voice into the highest decision-making body in our government, which is the Senate of Barbados. And that, Mr. President, is the first item on our agenda. As a government, and I know I speak when I say this on behalf of everyone on this side, this is a principle that we believe in wholeheartedly. This, I say, Mr. President, and I have no fear of contradiction with everyone on this side of the table that represents the government of the Barbados Labour Party under the leadership of Mia Amor Motley, is committed to ensuring that our youth have a voice. Mr. President, when the UK, a few years ago, began the process of debating whether or not they would leave Europe, there were all kinds of things swirling around. Misinformation, misinterpreted information, lack of information, no information. And if you read the reports, you will see that when the decision was taken and when the vote was taken, the highest search on Google was for the European Union. People voted to leave the European Union without even, in some instances, knowing what it was. And what we saw emerging from many of the reports on that vote, Mr. President, was that people who did not have the long range of a future down the road 20 years, 30 years, had been the ones that turned out to vote in favor of leaving the European Union. And our youth, who thought, nah, this will never happen. It's not possible. They didn't show up to vote. And they were horrified that they were going to be asked to live in a future that they had not crafted. They were going to be asked to live in a future that those who had made the decision were not going to be there to live, Mr. President. They were going to be asked to live in a world that they had not been a part of crafting. Mr. President, we in the Barbados Labour Party, we in this government wish to ensure that our young people at every single level, at boards, on social media, in our fora, in our platforms, yes, on our campaign platforms, and here in our Senate, that they have a voice in crafting the future that they must be a part of. That, Mr. President, is what we believe. And so it is on that basis, Mr. President, that the legislation, the amendment bill before us, Mr. President, proposes that at Section 2, that Section 37 of the Constitution is repealed, and the following is substituted, which would then constitute what is the qualification for membership of the Senate. We propose that it reads that subject to the provisions of Section 38, any person who at the date of his appointment is a citizen of Barbados at the age of 18 years or upwards shall be qualified to be appointed as a senator. Currently in our Constitution, the age at which that can take place and at the age at which a person can be a representative in the other place is 21 years old. You heard in the presentation from the Attorney General when he spoke and introduced this bill in the other place that there was at one time even a proposal for that to be 25 years old, but that was rejected, and it is now 21. And so, Mr. President, this is the first section of the amendment bill. Now, the second section has generated quite a bit of discussion, and that is with regard to the question of democracy. Mr. President, I believe that we live in a country where we have seen that democracy is alive and well. We have seen over 120 candidates emerging in the last general election held in January of 2022. We have seen, Mr. President, a plethora of both the established and emerging third parties. We have seen one-man parties, two-man parties. We've seen 13 candidates coming out, or we've seen 10 candidates coming out for a given political party. That, Mr. President, is an indication that not only is engagement alive and well, but that democracy is alive and well. Mr. President, I referred also to social media when I spoke about the role of our youth, and I refer to it here in terms of democracy. Mr. President, there has been a false notion that I reject completely, that democracy is practiced in 5-year intervals when we go to cast a ballot. Democracy is the ability to speak what you consider to be your truth without fear of reproach. Democracy is made public and international by social media, because here in Barbados, I am not aware that there is any person who on any topic under the sun, unless they are breaching the law criminally by abusing or attacking another person, they can speak whatever they consider to be their truth in public, on social media, to our faces. I believe that our government has been vilified on more than one occasion, Mr. President, because with a 30-seat majority then and now, we had to listen to people, Mr. President. We had to allow ourselves to hear what people said. And we don't have the view that we are always right. We are not of the view that everything we come up with is always going to be exactly right. And there have been instances, Mr. President, where we have announced a policy that was crafted with the best of intentions, and then the public of Barbados, our people in the exercise of their democratic right, spoke up and said, not so fast. We're not sure about this. We're not supportive of this. We don't prefer you to turn left. We would prefer if you turned right. And this is a government, Mr. President, that has listened. There are those in some quarters who would have us to believe that that means that we are weak. Mr. President, we see that as the exercise of democracy in action beyond 5-year cycles. Mr. President, this is a government under the leadership of our Prime Minister that has incorporated persons who are not necessarily reflective of our political party orientation. We have brought people from whence they came based on their skill set and included them in the decision-making of government. That, Mr. President, is democracy in action. We have sat in this Parliament, both the Senate and the other place, more in the course of a 3.5-year term than the previous administration prior to the Barbados Labour Party did in an entire term. Mr. President, we have practiced democracy in action as an administration. And so now here we are in a conversation where we do not again have an opposition, and our Prime Minister and the cabinets of Barbados and the other place have all collectively made the decision that we have always had a minority in government, in Parliament. You have the government that wins the majority of the seats, and you have the party that wins the minority number of the seats sitting in the opposition chairs. We do not have a party who can sit in the opposition chairs in the other place. And so the Prime Minister has made the determination. I'm not going to take a legal approach to this because I'm not a lawyer, but I'm going to speak to what I believe is the Barbadian way of inclusion, the Barbadian tradition of democracy and inclusion of all voices, even when they don't necessarily agree. I am going to speak to the importance of making sure that Barbadian voices always feel as though they have a seat at the table, because while the majority of Barbadians voted for the Barbados Labour Party, there are Barbadians who carry our signature, who carry our DNA, who are in their blood, by their blood, they are sisters and brothers, whatever their political or partisan beliefs are, they are Barbadians. And we believe, as an administration, that they too, in the tradition of minority voices, having a voice, that they too have an opportunity in this incarnation to sit in our Senate by appointment. None of us in this chamber, Mr. President, have been elected by the people. Not one of us. We have all been appointed by someone. Whether it is the Prime Minister or the President, we are not here because the people have elected us. And so the notion of direct appointment at the level of the Senate does not arise. What happens in this place, Mr. President, is that you have the President, the Constitution contemplates it, the President in consultation with the Prime Minister, the President in consultation with the Leader of the Opposition, but the President always in consultation will appoint on the advice of the government side, government senators, 12 of us, independent senators, 11 of them, and in consultation with the Leader of the Opposition, 2 of them. There's always an appointment. And in this instance, Mr. President, what this administration is seeking to do is to allow those people who have a contrary view to how the country should be run to have an opportunity equally so alongside the government side, alongside the independent side, alongside an 18-year-old voice, Mr. President, and alongside an opposing voice. That, Mr. President, is the Constitution that we would wish to see of a government in the Senate. And so, on that basis, we are proposing to repeal and replace Section 75 of the Constitution and to have it replaced to where we treat to the question that there is no leader of the opposition in the other place, and that in Section 75, 1A, the President, the Prime Minister, or any other person shall act in accordance with the advice of the Leader of the Opposition, or the President, the Prime Minister, or any other person shall act after consultation with the Leader of the Opposition, and we are treating to speak to this as a construction paragraph, and this allows here for the consultations to take place with the party, and I'm reading from Section 75, 2, 1, the President, the Prime Minister, or that person shall seek the advice of or consult with the opposing political party that received the next highest number of votes in succession. And if no opposing political party advises or facilitates consultation with the President, the Prime Minister, or that other person, the President, the Prime Minister, or that other person shall act in his discretion. And so it is on that basis, Mr. President, that we would wish to propose that this honorable chamber consider the changes to the Constitution that allow for 1, an 18-year-old to sit in this place, and 2, the President in consultation to appoint on the basis of the political party that got the minority number of votes while we constitute the majority, that they should have an opportunity to appoint 2 senators to the chamber. Now, Mr. President, some may say that it is a rabbit hole. Some may say that the language of the text which talks about the political party that has the second highest number of votes may be a challenge, and we've seen that going in the public space, we've seen that on social media, we've seen it in the press as well. But Mr. President, in my non-legal view, and I said that up front, we have the majority of people in this country who are not lawyers, but they are Barbadians. They feel strongly about our country. They feel strongly about representation. They feel strongly that they deserve to have a voice. And so for many of them, what they want to be able to see, what they say to me when I talk to them when I'm out on the road, and what we hear from them as a political party, is that they want to make sure that there is an opportunity for all voices to be heard. And in this instance, imagine the magnanimity of a Barbados Labour Party government saying, look, we know that another political party that opposed us on the campaign trail did not win the majority, they did not win the government, but okay, we so believe not just in this instance in the construct of democracy in this place or the inclusion of voice, but we believe in the institutions that have constituted and represented democracy in this country for all this time. We are the Barbados Labour Party. There is a Democratic Labour Party. There is the APP, I believe it is now called, and there used to be the UPP. We believe in particular that the institutions that have forged our democracy and have moved from political party to political party in successive administrations in an unbroken tradition of democracy must be preserved in this country. It gives us no pleasure, Mr. President, to see another political party that we also believe is an institution in disarray. It gives us no pleasure, Mr. President, because we also come from a place where old people will say today for me, tomorrow for you, right? So the strength of the Barbados Labour Party in this time does not mean that we wish to see and preside over the destruction of another political party. That is not what we are seeking for, Mr. President, because they represent people, especially when they are mass-based political parties, and we are hoping, Mr. President, it is the hope of this administration, it is the intention of the Prime Minister and the Attorney General who have piloted these amendments through the other place and through Cabinet, and have spoken about them at great length in the public space, that these amendments can win the support of all members. Finally, Mr. President, I want to point out that we do not have a conversation about democracy and inclusion in the limited corridors of this Parliament. We do not have a conversation, Mr. President, about the exercise of appointments just in the limited halls of this corridor. Mr. President, there are a number of commissions, a number of functions that the leader of the opposition or a minority political party typically plays to ensure that there is balance going forward. Now, we as a government are very clear. We are always consultative, we engage, we reach out to everyone, and we have a consultative process. And at times, as I've said before, we pivot. But every government is not necessarily going to do that. So we have to make sure, Mr. President, that when you have a provision where there are commissions that have to be appointed with a blend of political appointees, that they represent the hue, the shape, the color, and the lens of the average Barbadian who constitute our people, Mr. President. They are our people. Whether they believe in the Barbados Labour Party, the Democratic Labour Party, or no party, they are Barbadians. And so we would wish to ensure that there is agency given to them as well. Mr. President, in closing, I ask, on behalf of the governments of Barbados, on behalf of the Barbados Labour Party, that we give 18-year-olds an opportunity to represent a population that needs voice at the policymaking level in this Senate, and that we do the same thing for opposition senators as well. The government has already committed, as part of the Republican transition process, to undertake a full constitutional review during the course of this year. We have committed that there will be the creation of a new constitutional commission, and that constitutional commission will look at the entire constitutional reform process, not bound in a slavish manner by anything that went before it in any of the commissions, but to have a contemporary engagement with the Barbadian public and with our people again, chapter by chapter, section by section, month by month, for an entire year until it is done. We have committed to doing that. There are things and changes that may be proposed and things that we would want to perhaps have an engagement on, and that can come and perhaps will come during the course of that Constitutional Review Commission. But what we are doing here now is trying to get on with the business of government in the interim. We are saying that in the interim, we are wanting to bring 18-year-olds into the Senate to allow for the youth voice to be heard, and that we want to make sure that as we go forward, including with the appointment of the same Constitutional Commission, that persons who constitute an opposition in this country, even at the level of the Senate, have an opportunity to recommend members to sit on those respective commissions. And so I commend this bill to this honorable chamber. I ask that all members certainly consider giving it your full support, because this is not a political play. This is about people, this is about Barbadians, and this is very much, in this incarnation, about continuing our rich tradition of preserving an inclusive democracy. I'm obliged to you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Cummins.
I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Thank you. Any other speakers on this matter? If there are no speakers, I'll put the question.
Thank
Senator
you.
Boyce.
Thank you for the recognition, Mr. President. My my secondary mask has just collapsed, sir. Hopefully my arguments will not suffer the same fate. Are you hearing me clearly, Mr. President? No?
It's a little
Just a moment,
iffy.
please. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. President. A surgical mask from a surgeon, sir. Sir, I want to start by welcoming us all and to congratulate the government on a resounding victory at the polls, sir. You're supposed to clap for that. And sir, we have come here literally. We're in a new place. We see new faces. We have moved from the location back to our home. And as we stand on these borrowed grounds, I must take a moment, sir, to personally state that I feel extremely honored to be here where my father once stood and spoke, sir. And as I look around at the stained glass remnants that occupy this parliament, sir, I could only hope that there may be some adjustments which would capture the republic for which we now occupy and speak for. Sir, I must also congratulate you on being reappointed. Congratulate the deputy president, who we look forward to hearing the contribution, sir, in this forum, and of course, the leader of government business for her elevation. What a year we had leading into this, sir. In that interim period which was brought on, sir, by the announcement of the election, when there was time to reflect on the previous sittings in the Senate, it really was a year where there were a number of matters which I think we as a country rallied together and were able to resolve to the betterment of the entire society. And I think we should be proud of the dialogue and the process which evolved, and which came out of the freak storm, the hurricane, COVID, the volcano, sir. And in hoping for an easier start this year, we're now facing a war which has the potential, if not the real, clear, and present danger of impacting our day-to-day lives, sir. But here we are. Here we are, sir, in our nascent republic. And I stand here with pride to speak in this new republic with regard to the legislation sought to be brought forth by the government. Sir, I believe that the intention of this legislation is good. It is a great, great intent. The government seeks, sir, to amend the Constitution, and the aim is set out clearly in the objects and reasons. It would alter the Constitution to change the qualifications for membership of the Senate and the House of Assembly, and to make better provision for a vacancy in the office of the Leader of the Opposition. And all these goals are compiled together, sir. There are three main aims. One, the lowering of the age from 21 to 18. Two, provision for the president to act on the advice of the opposition, or sorry, a mistake, to act on the advice of the political party who did not win the government but secured the second highest amount of votes in the last election. And finally, to allow the Prime Minister to execute her duties with regard to those which require consultation for a leader of an opposition for a process to be identified. And these are all practical, pragmatic, and good intentions, sir. Now, if I may, sir, I don't think anyone can argue with the intention of getting youth involved. Sir, secondly, I don't think anyone can argue with the process that is now required because it has been done doubly. So, you know, the first time something happens, sir, we can chalk it off to an aberration. The second time something happens, well, maybe it starts to develop a pattern, sir. So we have a situation where we are contemplating a process to involve the Democratic Labour Party. Mr. President, as an aside, sir, there might be some in this venue who say, well, the Democratic Labour Party involved already, sir. But they're not taking debate this day. And you cannot deny, sir, that you need to have opposition voices. Now, sir, when I went through the bill on the first reading and I listened to the Prime Minister speak, I had absolutely no concern with it. The intention as presented, sir, captured, I think, the imagination of most Barbadians, and it would be hard to say, well, that makes sense. That's a good point. But in the time given to reflect on its contents, it has resulted in some areas which I would like to draw to the attention of this House in the hope, sir, in the simple hope of encouraging further discussion, dialogue, clarification in a process of extra active citizenry as stipulated in the Charter, sir. I think, sir, you know, we start from the context of understanding not only where we are coming out of the election, but also, sir, in considering what is the mindset or the lay of the land as we are presently having this discussion. Sir, the issue that is seeking to be discussed in relation to lack of a leader of the opposition, some would say, have already been contemplated in the mind of the constitutional framers. I believe that is why, sir, that in the objects and reasons it is stated that is to make better provision for a vacancy. So if, sir, you accept that you're making better provision for a vacancy, therefore it stands to follow that there is existing provision already, sir. And if there is existing provision already in the Constitution, there therefore has to be, in our mind, a consideration of whether or not the Constitution is required to be amended for the purpose of achieving the objective. And if it is required to be amended, we answer that first question. Secondly is the process which we utilize in coming to the agreed amendment terms, mindful of the opinion of the populace currently, and as stated by the leader of government business so eloquently, that there is going to be a fully constituted constitutional review this year with engagement chapter by chapter, section by section. So we have a mechanism identified to go through any issues related to the Constitution, sir. And why I say it is relevant to consider where we are and where we stand, sir, it is that in another place and another time, I also am a practicing attorney at law, and when you do your interpretation, you have to be mindful of the context. However, sir, I try very hard to put on my legislator hat tightly, recognizing we are in a different place. But the reality is, sir, we are a new republic with the legislation passed at the end of last year for the appointment of a president. There was dialogue, there was debate, it is recording in Hansard as to what it was accepted and the process, and we saw the engagement and the interaction of the government to come to a place where persons felt comfortable, where there was the independence ending, republic starting with the appointment of Her Excellency. We do not yet, and we have not yet started the process of the roles and the powers and the necessary functions. We are at the start of our great experiment, sir. We are at the start of our great experiment in this new republic, sir. And we have to be mindful that persons may not be prepared to move as fast as we are and break things. I believe that's the expression, sir. Move fast and break things. Now, sir, also, besides the stated facts of what has happened, is that there have been challenges with regard, and I'll be very careful because certain things are before the courts. What is capable of saying, sir, is that there have been challenges with regard to the institutions and the processes. This is a fact which we are all aware of, sir, and mindful. So we step back and we look at what is being proposed, and I believe that that is a factor in this debate. So firstly, sir, being aware of the lay of the land, we recognize that the intention is to make better provision, which therefore says there is provision already. That's under section 75. Further, sir, I have referred to this document, Mr. President, I believe it was before your time. I believe it was also given out to senators when the Republic discussion started, sir. The report of the Constitutional Review Commission 1998, which we assume is to be replaced by the new report coming out of the process, which is contemplated to start shortly, sir. But this, for now, is the document which we have, and I believe everyone would have been given a copy, sir, via email, and I believe the clerk has accessed it. But, sir, the issue of vacancy in the office of Leader of the Opposition was already specifically contemplated, sir, by the Ford Commission at paragraph 942, sir. And in that, sir, there is specific reference to what is suggested to be done, which also calls for the process of consulting, and we'll come back to that difference, sir, consulting with the opposition parties. Sir, with regard to the lowering of the age to 18, I can be honest, sir. When I first heard of lowering the age to 18, I felt funny about it. The reason is because I could only act on my own personal experience. And at 18, I didn't have the maturity that I should be put anywhere near a House of Parliament, sir. But I was able to recognize that not all persons have my feelings, sir. And I had to force myself not to practice inverse ageism, where I say, well, the youth don't know what they do, and I have to accept. They recognize and they are extremely articulate. Or maybe I just didn't want to get dragged on Twitter, sir. But the point is this. I think everyone will accept that the youth of this nation are much more articulate, sir, are much more articulate than they once were. They have access to tremendous resources, and a slight segue, we can't conveniently listen to them because they're making noises about the levy, sir, but that's not what we're discussing now, so we can't conveniently be listening to the youth. But, sir, the question of the youth and the age to serve, when considered in the Ford report, was also raised. There were arguments for the age to be raised. However, it was accepted that 21 was the age. I believe, sir, that this is a question which I think it really shouldn't be a big reason for pause. However, sir, is the government business to be impacted if this issue is given the opportunity to be ventilated as stipulated? That's what we're discussing here. Is it necessary for this legislation at this time in terms of the surrounding factors when there's an avenue and process available to facilitate the resolution of any niggling doubts you have, sir, in a well-exercised format? So, sir, another factor which, when we draw the picture as to where we stand as a nation, sir, is that I believe everyone in here is comfortable with regard to what I call our legitimacy and our sovereignty as a nation. There can be no doubt. However, sir, I have had cause to express personal reticence at some positions which are being articulated, sir. Some will say even being amplified and broadcast. And where language is being used to seek to incite a worrisome assertion which questions the validity of our institutions, sir. So we can't turn a blind eye to it. It is going on. It is a factor we have to be mindful of when we are doing the people's business. While we are certain of where we stand, we must be mindful of others. And others, and even ourselves, must be aware of our biases and understand why there are certain views which we will be ready to accept and reject, sir. And that, sir, brings it to the question of the facts which we are dealing with. Sir, I believe that the scenario I have just laid out with regard to the surrounding circumstances will make it prudent, if the government were so minded, sir, to utilize the avenue provided of the constitutional review process. However, sir, the government holds all the cards. The voice of the people, as stated by the Honorable Prime Minister, is the voice of God. I remember the quote somewhere in Latin, but I dare not try to do it properly, sir. And they have spoken twice. So if you didn't hear before, hopefully you would have heard now, but from the rumbling, sir, some of them didn't see that they're here. I don't know if you noticed why they did there, sir, some of them, right? So, sir, that is another factor which we must be mindful of in terms of the surrounding circumstances. But there is one point with regard to law which I must narrow this conversation about, sir. And in light of the framework where I have just established with regard to the questions being asked, where we were last year, the passage of the bill in September to create the office of the president, sir, the nascent republic. Sir, the president's powers as currently set out in the Constitution or set out in Section 75. These powers, sir, are expressly stated in the absence of a leader of an opposition, Her Excellency's powers to make determinations, sir. And it said, and I'm reading from Section 75A, act in discretion in the exercise of any function in respect of which it is provided in the Constitution that the Governor General shall act in accordance with the advice of the leader of the opposition, sir. So that is what the constitutional framers said in 1966, sir. Sir, when the issue came up under the Ford Commission, sir, it was raised, sir, and in their process, and sir, I think before I go on, sir, the amount of meetings which the Ford Commission had to come to the conclusion that they did were not small, sir. The meetings are listed out in the opening chapter, sir, in the letter, and not only were they done locally, sir, they were done overseas with the diaspora, and then there were private meetings which were not recorded. It's all here in the document. Sir, constitutional aid was provided by experts and luminaries with regard to what was drafted and put together. And I say this because it is relevant. It is not just a matter of saying, well, you're going back 22 years. We're going back to the last time a report was done which canvassed the people which had the benefit of exports and proposals made. And in that report, sir, which was followed in both houses of Parliament when the issue of the Republic came on last year, sir, it contemplated what should occur in the event of the Republic considered of the absence of the leader of the opposition. The Ford report stipulates, sir, in relation to that at 942, the senators who are appointed, 6 senators should be appointed by the president acting in the president's discretion after consultation, Mr. President, after consultation with A, the leader of any political party which was supported in the election by the votes of at least 10% of all those who voted in the election, and B, such other persons as the president considers ought to be consulted. Again, sir, the discretion remains. The word utilized is consulted, sir. And there is an indication that you speak to those who got at least 10%, but it's clearly indicated that you speak to such other persons as the president considers ought to be consulted. What is proposed, sir, seeks to have the existing powers limited to acting on the advice, sir, which is separate for lawyers, acting on advice and consultation, 2 separate things, sir. And what is proposed, while it is commendable, sir, seeks at the start of this new republic and this new government term to say that we wish the president to act on the advice of the party which got the second amount of votes. That is the fetter of an existing power in the Constitution, and while we may agree to it, should we not have discourse? Should we not have consultations and get persons who may not be comfortable to have a say? To say that in these circumstances it is a good idea and therefore we should go along, yes, it is a good idea. But the purpose of a Senate is to review, sir. And this is not in any way seeking to obstruct the government's business, which is allowed to function and continue. This is simply saying that the Constitution says this, it has granted this power, before we abrogate it, perhaps we have a consultation and we weigh the different views and come to a consensus where we can come in here and say that the commission has ventilated all these issues. This is the will, let us go forth. There is a reason, sir, the Constitution contemplates a 2/3 requirement. If the Constitution viewed and the supremacy of the law viewed that a government, for whatever reason, could make these determinations without someone saying, well, Kadir, let's look at X, Y, Z, well, there wouldn't be the need for the 2/3 requirement, sir. It is also to be noted, sir, that in every respect in the Constitution where there's a stipulation for acting on advice, and this is, of course, subject to correction. This is my attempt at constitutional law, sir. I wouldn't be like others who state they're constitutional law experts, sir. But in every instance where you see the president acting on the advice, it is the advice of an elected entity. Because acting on the advice is different from consulting with, sir. And if you're acting on the advice of someone who's elected, you're saying, okay, well, the people have spoken. And I, in the exercise of my power, must act on the advice of who they have spoken, sir. So, sir, I wished to draw this to the attention of the House. I have spoken with my colleagues, sir, and recognizing, and I must say this because, sir, you weren't here. I am very familiar of what standing up and going against the grain or conventional wisdom will bring. I believe it's my duty to this state to be fearless in the advocacy and to recommend in these circumstances, sir, that is prudent that there be some dialogue and consultation with the stakeholders so that we can find a common consensus as we move forward with this process. Mr. President, I want to thank you for your indulgence, and I am grateful to be here, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Boyce. Senator Boyce. This is the other Senator Boyce.
Mr. President, I rise to give voice, to add my voice to this debate, and I will focus on the alterations.
Is there a mic on?
It's not on?
Yeah,
It is, man. The light is on.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll focus on the alterations in relation to age and eligibility. I do so out of an appreciation, Mr. President, that often in a nation's development, it must ask itself tough questions about itself, about its ideals, its soul, and in these moments, it must grapple with the question of who has been left out of the project of democracy. Mr. President, there was a time in this country that the answer to that was black people. It was the descendants of the enslaved. It was poor people. It was women. And in response to this soul searching that has led us, it is in response to this soul searching that has led us to the highest percentage of women parliamentarians in the House. It has led us to gender parity on the government side of the Senate that I hope will lead to robust social policy protection for the nation's women. It is, of course, the exclusions, whether they be cultural or legal, have also included persons with disabilities. And today I stand here as a person with a disability in the path of the other persons with disabilities who have stood here. and who not only have stood here, but have fought to remind us of the idea and the ideals of Barbados and what they can and must mean now, Mr. President. Let us be clear that we can always do better at bending the arc of history toward justice, toward more of our greatest selves. But let us also be clear, Mr. President, that whatever we achieve when we make the attempt so to do is always worth the effort. Mr. President, the alterations before the House today have raised the perennial legal and academic question about whether our Constitution is a living document or whether we ought to leave it as the framers intended it. Mr. President, my own view of that question is that as a result of the importance of the Constitution, because it is the place we retreat to for the settling of legal questions and the vindication of inalienable rights, that we should take the opportunity when necessary to amend the Constitution and to make sure that it more closely represents the ideas and ideals of this country and its people, particularly as people and a country having survived the colonial experience. And I believe that is what we attempt to do today, Mr. President. Mr. President, my own view aside, the revered Caribbean constitutionalist and author, the late Professor Simeon McIntosh, goes further than the living document argument when he says that our Caribbean constitutions are a thing of poetry. He says they are a poetic and metaphoric act where a people order their collective life through the composition of their fundamental political text and in terms of some vision of themselves as to the kind of people they aspire to be and of the political world they should wish for themselves and their posterity. The question for this honorable chamber is, what world do we wish for ourselves and our posterity, Mr. President? The thinking behind the original Section 37 provision was that young people could not contribute to the making of and deliberations about our laws. This debate, Mr. President, however, presents an opportunity for us to take another view, a better view, a view that more closely accords with the realities of this country at this time. Perhaps the debate and the bill before us also serve as a reminder of what Parliament is for. It is for the revealing of blind spots, the improvement of lives. Perhaps an appropriate reminder in these early days of the parliamentary term. Sir, if we were to leave the Constitution in this regard as the framers intended, we would be compromising the aspirations of this country and how progressive we can truly say that we are. Our nation's young people, Mr. President, are and will continue to be impacted by the issues of the day, issues like climate change, issues like gender, issues like population turnover, and the viability of our social security infrastructure. All of this while youth participation in democracy in Barbados and the Caribbean remain too low. Our young people deserve a say and a seat. To leave the Constitution as the framers intended would be to rob us all, and I think that is an important point, Mr. President, because this amendment has been framed in a particular way, and I want to reframe it because it is really an amendment for, and the leader of government business averted to it, it is really an amendment for the nation's young people. It is really an amendment for the nation's future, Mr. President. The participation of young people in democracy has to extend to representation in both houses, Mr. President. For whatever mischief the framers of the Constitution were trying to prevent by placing the age of eligibility at 21, the political world, to follow Professor McIntosh's formulation, that we currently inhabit requires that we change, that we amend, that we aspire to more. We wring our hands often in this country about how to get the nation's young people to participate in democracy. The amendments before the House this afternoon, Mr. President, represent one way that we can do, one necessary way that we can do just that. Our Prime Minister has called us all, but particularly our nation's young people, toward active citizenship. We cannot achieve active citizenship, Mr. President, if a swath of the nation's population is required by law to sit on the sidelines. And it is my hope that as youth become active players in the contact sport of democracy, that ours and perhaps even their voices be heard more, and that ours and perhaps their issues be grappled with throughout the political term. Representation undoubtedly matters, Mr. President, but as we aspire to more, it is not about participation for the sake of participation, Mr. President. It is not having young people for the sake of having young people, Mr. President. Inclusion must mean equitable and dignified consideration of children and youth as citizens with agency. We need to confront what may be unpopular or controversial elements in our public discourse, the anomalies of our legal system that deprive 16 to 18-year-olds of access to necessary advice, information, and health services, Mr. President. The failings of an institution meant to protect our girls. And in this moment, it is not lost on me that I, a senator with a disability and locks, with for no particular religious purpose, get the opportunity to express myself freely and to engage in the expression of autonomy most fully in ways that children across this country do not. And those are the conversations that we must have. And they will require that we order ourselves differently, that we aspire to more. There has been a call, given in light of these amendments, there has been a call for process. Senator Boyce on the other side just extensively explained it. But Mr. President, the constitutional amendments before this House today and anything that we attempt to do here today does not preclude a substantive constitutional reform exercise. In fact, the Prime Minister has gone to great lengths to say that there will be a commission. She says the commission will be sufficiently staffed and resourced. She says that she indicated to the House on Monday evening the person who will head that commission. And it is my hope that when that time comes, that Barbadians will engage with the verve and intellectual fervor for which they are well known. Coming out of that process, I, for one, hope to see an expansive Bill of Rights that includes explicit disability protections. that includes explicit gender protections and attention to positive duties of the state. For the work of making perfect our imperfect polity requires redressing imbalances. Imbalances, Mr. President, that we did not previously perceive. Imbalances that we have taken to be staples of Barbadian life. We must now do better. We must now amend and aspire to more. I hope that these amendments, the constitutional reform exercise that flows, and anything that flows from this chamber will be part of the work of developing a more capacious understanding of Barbados' democracy, one that at regular intervals is stretched to include persons previously excluded and ignored. Any change born of that project, Mr. President, is worthwhile, desirable even. In closing, Mr. President, I wish to again signal my support for the amendments before this House and to pray the safe passage of the bill through this chamber. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Boyce. Senator Anne Boyce. Other speakers? Senator Reverend Dr. Rogers. Oh, sorry. Good.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I rise to lend my voice to this debate on these constitutional reforms. But first of all, let me just express my sincere gratitude to Her Excellency the President for affording me this opportunity to be present in this chamber to deliberate on the issues which affect the people of this country. I also wish to commend my fellow senators for having been appointed to this place, and I look forward to your presentations in time to come. Mr. President, the bill before us, as has been articulated already, deals with a number of It deals with a number of constitutional amendments. First of all, the age of persons serving in the Senate. First of all, I wish to commend Senator Andwele, who just spoke, for his great presentation. I think it's one of the best presentations we'll probably have in the Senate for a first-time speaker. I think it was very articulate. I wish to thank you for that presentation. And it really is a segue into what we're dealing with in terms of the age of persons to serve in the Senate. Personally, sir, we have seen human thought evolve meteorically over the past 2 decades or so. Our technology has improved beyond anything we could have fathomed when we were youngsters. And in so doing, our young people are very knowledgeable and extremely articulate, and no doubt have the capability to not only represent themselves, but also to speak on behalf of others. So within that context, I do not believe that there's very much of an issue in moving the age from 21 to 18. Of course, I also took into consideration Senator Boyce's reflection on his own time as a youngster, but I suspect that that has nothing to do with what we're dealing with here, but just because perhaps he spent an inordinate amount of time in the environs of Waterford. He isn't here to hear that. And so that particular portion, sir, I have no problem with the amendments being made here in terms of the fact that we have young people who are more than capable of representing their peers and representing persons in this country. I do, however, take into consideration Senator Boyce's appeal that if we're going to have a full constitutional reform, perhaps that is one of the things that we can look at that time. But what concerns me more, sir, is the Section 4 of this bill, the repeal and replacement of Section 75 of the Constitution, the vacancy in the office of the Leader of the Opposition. Mr. President, given the beautiful legal argument that Senator Boyce gave, I just wish to add a pragmatic side to what we're doing here to highlight a few what I consider to be anomalies in this particular section. This particular amendment, sir, introduces a creature into the Constitution that was not there before. If you look at Section 75 of the Section B, the reference to the Leader of the Opposition shall be read as a reference to the opposing political party which obtained the highest number of votes in the general election following the dissolution of Parliament. Sir, votes in a general election. I think that is where the crux of the matter comes in this particular piece of legislation. And I'll just point out what I mean. It does not seem to take into account Section 74 of the Constitution, which speaks to how the Leader of the Opposition is to be selected. Section 74(2), whenever the President has occasion to appoint a Leader of Opposition, he shall appoint the member of the House of Assembly who, in his judgment, is best able to command the support of a majority of those members who do not support the government. If there is no such person, the member of that House who, in his judgment, commands the support of the largest single group of such members who are prepared to support one leader. These are two opposing factors here in this legislation, sir, because we do know that we have a practice in this country or a tradition, as has happened before, as occurred under the previous administration, where a person can cross the floor in the other place. And as it stands at this time, if one person crosses the floor in the other place, in accordance with Section 74, it creates a problem in terms of who is the Leader of the Opposition. Here we have this amendment, and I believe it is with a deep sense of altruism that it was suggested that we have persons from the political party which received the highest number of votes after the government to have 2 senators to the Senate. However, the problem is, sir, that the votes procured by a person who crosses the floor in the other place and then has the right to select 2 senators, which one takes precedence? The 2 senators that are selected in this legislation, or the 2 that will come from the Leader of the Opposition should a person cross the floor in the other place? And what it means is that we can have a very embarrassing situation where 2 persons can be selected today and tomorrow they can be removed. Of course, I take into account what the leader of the government business in this place has already pointed out, that according to Acts 2:46, we're all in one accord. But that can change tomorrow. And if such a leader of the opposition emerges in the other place, what happens to this piece of legislation that we're passing right now, that we intend to pass right now? What happens to the 2 senators who have been selected in the other place? And I point this out because, as I pointed out, sir, this creature of votes in a general election comes in. Once you introduce that, you've created something else. Because the person who crosses the floor, as this situation currently exists now, the votes that they're operating on are votes that were cast for the ruling party, and not votes of persons who oppose the ruling party. So we're creating, I believe, sir, a conundrum. It's just my layman's view. I can be wrong. But I believe it is something that really needs to be considered, because it can happen. We've already heard, sir, even in the wake of the election just passed, a person who once served in the House was telling other people, cross the floor. Cross. And it brings in something else. Once we've introduced votes in a general election into the Constitution, it brings something else. What value is the vote of a person? We brought something else into the Constitution where it says, by our practice, the people's votes are only useful once every 5 years. It is just for me to get in. When I get in, I can do whatever I want with it. But when we've introduced votes in the general election into the Constitution, it cannot be like that anymore. And so I believe that there are some things that need to be added to this amendment before we even think about putting it to the vote. As one who touted constitutional reform and encouraged the people of this country, let us support our move to a republic, and then we will immerse ourselves into constitutional reform. I believe that this presents the perfect opportunity for us to start. It is not a hypothetical situation, it is a problem that we have. And this is a good opportunity for us to start looking at what type of constitution we're going to shape for our republic. Senator Boyce would have pointed out the recommendations in the Ford Commission of 1998, and perhaps that is something we can look at more seriously when it comes to this. The leader of government business made a very profound point in her speech. This is not child's play. This is not child's play. We must be punctilious in our dealings with the affairs of the people. And given the atypical nature of our circumstances, as I pointed out, I believe that there are some aspects, there's a creature introduced into this bill which sets up the very undermining of the bill if we do not change other things within the Constitution as well. So we may be passing a bill as a part of an amendment to a Constitution which undermines the very thing we're trying to fix. Should one person decide tomorrow that they're not comfortable on the side of the House that they're sitting. I believe that there are some measures that must be put into place. Since this bill introduces votes in the general election, we must acknowledge that an individual who crosses the floor is there by the virtue of votes in a general election. And we have already identified opposition and ruling, and they're there by virtue of the votes of a ruling party. I believe to prevent any problems with this bill, given the anomalous situation we're in, as Senator Boyce said, it has happened twice, so perhaps we can't say lightning can't strike the same place twice. But given the situation that we're in, I believe that there should be a clause put in this bill which automatically triggers a by-election if someone crosses the floor in a situation such as this. Because based on Section 74 of the Constitution, that person can become the leader of the opposition, but they will not be the person who had a large number of votes that opposed the ruling party. So the very thing you're trying to fix will not be fixed unless there's such a clause put in this. We can say just for the situation where one party wins all the seats in the general election, we can say that, because that is the problem we have here. As I said, sir, I believe that this is the perfect place to start. I believe that now is the right time for us to look more seriously at how we treat to the vote of our people. There's a saying that I used in this house, in this chamber before. I'll use it again. The words of Johann Henry Wichern in 1842, as he stood on the grave of Martin Luther, the great reformer, some 300 years later. Wichern said, "If we do as our fathers did, we will not do as our fathers did. If we do as our fathers did, we will not do as our fathers did." This is a time when we can make a serious change to the Constitution. We have already committed ourselves to constitutional reform, and I believe that this is a perfect place to start. But, sir, as I've pointed out, this amendment introduces a creature into the Constitution which changes everything. Votes in a general election. By that, I'm obliged to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Dr. Rogers. Additional speakers? If not, I'll call on Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will lend my voice to this debate, but I want to start by asking a question. It's a very simple one, because I've been listening to a lot of persons across the island speaking about this particular amendment of having an 18-year-old become a member of the Senate. And the question I want to ask for those in here and on the outside is, how do we as a people speak proudly and passionately about becoming a republic, about having self-determinism and all of these things, and then on the other hand still seem to hold on to some of the old mindsets that suggested at one point in time that young people should be seen and not heard. To me, this is the ultimate hypocritical approach. You're saying in one's breath, an 18-year-old can drink alcohol. An 18-year-old is responsible enough to make decisions about sex. An 18-year-old is responsible enough to make decisions about who they want to run a country, can vote. But then if they have the opportunity themselves to be a part of the process of decision-making, you're saying that they're immature, or you believe that they're immature. But the other things that you're allowing them to do, drive cars and other things, call for a certain level of responsibility. And having been in a position myself, and I can speak from experience, of going to work at the government industrial schools as a supervisor at age 18, mentoring boys and girls who in some instances were older than myself. I find it difficult to understand where the angst would come from. And so, on that particular note, I support this 100%. Because if you're going to be self-determined, there has to be a confidence within yourselves that the decisions that you make are grounded in you being able to be the ones who want the change. You being the ones who want to expand the ideas that come at you. Because it's all right for us as adults to make decisions, but none of us in this room, none of us can say that when we were 18, 19, 20, that we did not have ideas about politics, ideas about how we want Barbados to be. I certainly did. But the way that I chose to express myself was by watching, observing, and learning in the art form of calypso. At 18 years old, I started. And for those who would have followed my career, would have seen the types of commentaries that I would have been making at 19, at 20, at 21. You don't just make them out of the blue, you have to be involved. So that if we are talking about giving our young people these types of opportunities, there's also something that we also have to do. We have to change the conversation around education. Because it cannot be only based on academia. Civics. How do you begin to get people at a young age to understand their responsibilities as Barbadians? How do you get young people to be connected to what is going on? And especially in a time where these devices continue to bring in influences from all over the world that 99.9% of the time have nothing at all to do with our experience in Barbados. But our young people will go to this and see these things and become a part of it in some instances. But here we have the opportunity now to make a decision that would seek to engage them in a completely different way, to give them a voice where they can be, again, heard, not just seen, but heard. And as adults, we are shaped by our own experiences, all of us. But Mr. President, your experience is not mine. There are some things that we will share, but the way that I view the world based on my own personal experiences, you may not have any idea about why I think the way I do on certain issues at all. And that is relevant towards how we deal with our younger people also. We cannot expect them to see the world the same way that we do, because we are shaped differently. And so I see this as a wonderful example of adults themselves being mature enough to understand that there are other viewpoints, and that age is not the determining factor, but it is one's ability to reason and to express that reasoning that is paramount within these halls. And so I fully support it. I've listened very carefully to the concerns about the Second Amendment. And again, I have a question to ask, because as I thought about it, we're using what I guess we can call an anomaly. In looking in the past of, for the very first time, one political party winning all the seats that were available. And in that, one person decides, okay, well, I no longer wish to be a part of this. And they automatically become the leader of the opposition because there was no other opposition. But just think about it. You think going forward, you had what we're proposing today, if that was passed, and the president had the opportunity to select on consultation persons to be the leader of the opposition. And a person then decided, well, you know what? I no longer want to be with the ruling party I want. That person becomes an independent because they're not tied to any political party at all. And it's something that you're going to have to think about, because that person is no longer ruling party unless they join the second party, which, as this clearly states, is the one that has the highest number of votes afterwards. They're independent. How can you then suggest that that person becomes the leader of the opposition? So when I think about it, I understand some of the concerns, but I think that if there's anything, if I may use the word, mitigates against some of those things, is that we have to be very clear that when you leave a political party, you're an independent. And what is it in the Constitution or anywhere at all that suggests that you automatically become the leader of the opposition? It only happened that way because this was something that never happened before. So I just want us to seriously, I'm not a lawyer, but I think these are things that we must seriously consider when we seek to, and I don't want to use the word be contentious on these issues, but when we see these things as being foreseeable problems.
Mr. President, I
want to raise the voice.
Yes, as just a point, I think my learned friend, really statement that was made, I didn't think it was intentional, but there is specific provision in Section 74 to the assertion made that the leader of the opposition is provided for in Section 74 as a person who says, I do not support the government, so it wouldn't become an independent. That person will still be the leader of opposition. Just a point of...
Thank you for your point of elucidation.
Elucidation, sir.
Senator King.
Elucidation, sir.
Senator King, please continue.
Thank you. So, I believe, though, taking into consideration what has just been said, that yes, there are some things that we need to, like I said before, begin to look at in a complete different way. But again, the whole idea of constitutional reform still rests with us in here. And I've heard Senator Boyce refer to having a lot more consultation on these things, but I believe strongly that these are matters that I believe would have gone out to the general public in a way for some of these decisions to be made. And again, I personally have no problems with it as it stands, but again, I will be guided in these areas. As I said before, I'm not a lawyer, but I just believe that some of these things, especially on this second one, need another consideration. And with that, with those few words, I'm obliged to say.
Thank you very much, Senator King. Senator Cummings.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this House now do break for lunch until 2:30 p.m.
The question is that this sitting be suspended until 2:30 p.m. today. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Who thinks the ayes have it? This sitting is therefore so suspended.